"Where's my boat?" I heard my own voice crack as I said it, standing on the empty concrete slab behind my house where the Whitfield had sat for 11 years. My daughter walked out onto the back porch, car keys still in her hand, and I already knew from her face before she said a single word. "I sold it, Grandpa," she said. That's what she'd called me since she was 4 years old, and hearing it now, in that flat, defensive tone, felt like a stranger wearing my granddaughter's voice. "Tyler needed the money for his food truck. I figured you weren't using it anyway. My name is Harold Whitaker. I'm 68 years old, and for 32 years I ran a small marine repair shop on the eastern shore of Maryland, the kind of place where watermen brought their engines when nobody else could get them running again. I know wood, I know water, I know how a hull should sit when it's balanced right. What I didn't know, standing there that Tuesday afternoon, was that the person I loved most in this world could sell the last thing my late wife ever asked me to keep. My wife Ruth died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer, the quiet kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already made its decision. Before she got sick, we used to sit on that same back porch every evening with 2 cups of coffee and talk about the boat we were going to build together once I retired from the shop. Not buy, build. Ruth grew up on the water in Crisfield, and she always said a boat that somebody built with their own hands carried something a boat off a factory floor never could. I never got the chance to build it with her. Ruth passed 8 months before I retired. But 3 years ago I found an old wooden Chesapeake dead rise, half rotted, sitting in a barn outside Cambridge, and I bought it for almost nothing because nobody else wanted the work it needed. I spent 14 months rebuilding that boat plank by plank in my garage. New ribs, new transom, hand-caulked seams the old way because that's how Ruth's father used to do it. I named her the Whitfield, after Ruth's maiden name, and the day I finally splashed her in the water, I sat alone in the stern for almost 2 hours, just listening to the water slap against the hull, imagining Ruth sitting across from me the way she used to. My granddaughter Paige moved in with me 18 months ago. Her mother, my daughter, passed when Paige was 19, and Paige never really had anyone steady after that except me. I put her through the last 2 years of nursing school. I paid for her car when hers broke down. I never once made her feel like a burden, because she wasn't one. She was the only family I had left that still called me by name instead of just a memory. 6 months ago, Paige started dating a young man named Tyler. Charming enough on the surface, always had some plan that was about to make him rich. First it was flipping sneakers, then it was some cryptocurrency thing, and now it was a food truck, some barbecue concept he swore was going to take off. Every single idea needed money he didn't have, and every single time, somehow, Paige found a way to help him find it. 4 days before that Tuesday, I flew out to Ohio for my granddaughter's wedding. Not Paige. My other granddaughter, Ruth's sister's girl, out in Columbus. I asked Paige to keep an eye on the house while I was gone, feed the cat, water the tomatoes. I even left her the extra key to the boat shed, just in case a storm came through and she needed to check the lines. "Just keep things steady while I'm gone," I told her. She said, "Of course, Grandpa." Those 3 words cost me more than I understood at the time. When I pulled back into my driveway that Tuesday evening, something felt wrong before I even shut off the engine. The slab behind the house was bare. I told myself maybe she'd moved it up to the shop for me as a surprise, some kind of maintenance thing. I walked back there anyway, already knowing. Nothing. Just the trailer blocks sitting empty in the grass and a faint rectangle of paler concrete where the hull had sat for 3 years. I called Paige. It rang 4 times before she picked up, and I heard Tyler's voice in the background before hers. I asked her straight out where the Whitfield was, and there was a silence on the line that told me everything before she opened her mouth. She showed up 20 minutes later with Tyler trailing behind her, wearing a new watch I'd never seen before. Paige wouldn't look me in the eye at first. Finally, she said it. "I sold it, Grandpa. Tyler needed $45,000 for the truck and the equipment and the permits. And I figured, since you're not out on the water much anymore, you wouldn't mind." You wouldn't mind. Those words landed on me like a fist to the chest. That boat wasn't a boat, I told her. It was the last promise I made to your great-aunt Ruth, the last thing I built with my own 2 hands for a woman I never got to build anything with while she was still healthy enough to sit in it. Paige's chin trembled, but she didn't back down. Tyler stood behind her with his arms crossed, saying nothing, which somehow felt worse than if he'd said something stupid. "It's just an old wooden boat," Tyler finally said. "It's not like it was worth anything." "It's the only thing I have left of her dreams," I said. He shrugged like that answer meant nothing to him at all. I walked into my garage without another word. I sat down on an overturned bucket next to the workbench where I'd spent 14 months of Saturday mornings, sanding ribs and steaming planks, and I stayed there until it got dark outside. I wasn't even angry by then. I was just hollowed out. The garage still smelled like teak oil and sawdust. Ruth's photograph sat on the shelf above the workbench, the one from our honeymoon in Ocean City, and I looked at her for a long time. I finally built it, I whispered to her picture. And now it's gone. That night I called the county sheriff's office, hoping for some kind of quick answer. The deputy who came out was polite but not much help. Since your granddaughter had lawful access to the property and the shed key, he told me, gently, this might end up being more of a civil matter than a straightforward theft case. You'll probably want to talk to an attorney. Attorney. Civil matter. None of those words belonged anywhere near a boat I'd built with my own hands for my dead wife. At 8:45 that night, my phone rang. The name on the screen was one I didn't recognize, Shore County Marine Sales. I almost let it go to voicemail, figuring it was some kind of extended warranty scam. Instead, I answered. This is Harold, I said. Mr. Whitaker, a young man's voice said, careful, almost nervous. My name is Danny Ferris. I'm the general manager here at the dealership. I'm calling about a wooden dead rise that came in on consignment this afternoon. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I know, I said quietly. There was a long pause on his end. Sir, he said, his voice dropping lower, there's something you need to come see. I frowned, gripping the phone tighter. I emptied that boat before I left town, I told him. There shouldn't be anything left aboard her. It was hidden, he said. Well hidden. I think you need to come down here tonight if you can. I don't remember much of the drive out to that dealership. I remember my hands were shaking on the wheel the whole way, and Danny's voice kept looping through my head. You left something aboard, and none of it made a single bit of sense to me. The dealership sat right off Route 50, tucked behind a row of pontoon boats and jet skis, the lot lights already humming against the dark. Danny met me at the door before I'd even cut the engine, younger than I'd pictured, maybe mid-30s, wearing a windbreaker with the dealership logo stitched on the chest, looking like a man who hadn't slept well in a couple of nights. Mr. Whitaker, he said, I'm real sorry about all this. Can I see her? I asked. Not yet, he said. There's something you need to see first. He walked me through the service bay, past 2 other boats up on stands, until we reached the Whitfield sitting under the fluorescent lights exactly the way I'd left her, down to the little brass cleat I'd polished the week before I left. Seeing her again nearly stopped my heart in my chest. I set my hand flat against the hull the way you'd touch an old friend's shoulder. I'm sorry, I whispered to her, like she could hear me. An older mechanic walked over, gray-bearded, wiping his hands on a rag. You, Harold? He asked. I nodded. You built this yourself, he said. It's not every day we see joinery like this anymore. I thanked him, my throat too tight to say much else. We almost missed it, he said. Missed what? I asked. Come aboard, he said. Show you. We climbed into the cockpit together, and the old mechanic knelt down by the engine box, pried up a section of the deck boards I had cut and fitted myself 14 months earlier, boards I would have sworn I knew every inch of. Underneath was a shallow compartment I had never once noticed, built in, it looked like, long before I ever got hold of that hull. Inside sat a small waterproof case, the kind fishermen use for keeping tackle dry. I've had this hull 3 years, I said. I had no idea that was in there. Danny knelt down and lifted the case out carefully, set it on the engine box between us, and popped the latches. For a moment none of us said a word. The first thing I saw was handwriting I would know anywhere in this world. Not because anyone had told me, because there was an envelope sitting right on top with my name written across the front in Ruth's careful cursive, Harold. My heart stopped cold in my chest. I reached in with hands that wouldn't hold still. A small leather notebook, a folded chart of the Chesapeake Bay, its creases gone soft with age, a handful of old photographs, and underneath everything, a thick envelope sealed shut with a strip of blue tape, and across the front, in Ruth's handwriting, 6 words. For whenever you finally build her. I couldn't breathe. Danny and the mechanic stepped quietly off the boat and left me alone with it. The only sound left was the water lapping against the hulls in the dark outside and the hum of the shop lights above me. I opened the notebook first. Page after page in Ruth's hand, notes she must have written years before she got sick. Names of coves we'd talked about anchoring in. A little sketch of how she wanted the cabin trim painted, robin's egg blue, her favorite color, the same color as the trim I'd actually painted, without ever remembering where the idea had come from. Beside one entry she'd written, "Don't let him rush the varnish. He always rushes the varnish." I laughed out loud, alone in that shop, tears running down my face at the same time. She wasn't wrong. She never was. Ruth had planned this boat down to the color of the cushions, years before her diagnosis, and she never once stopped believing I'd actually build it. I just never knew she'd left proof of that belief hidden 6 inches under my own feet the whole time I was building her. A soft knock came from the dock outside. Danny stood there. "Sorry to bother you," he said. I wiped my face and asked him how in the world they'd even found that compartment in the first place. "Our surveyor noticed the deck sounded hollow in that one spot during the pre-sale inspection," he said. "We figured somebody built that compartment into the hull a long time ago, way before you ever got hold of her. Then we found this," and he nodded toward the case in my lap. "Figured it belonged to somebody who cared about this boat more than most people care about anything." "You'd be right about that," I told him. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why didn't the buyer just take her and go?" "Because once we found that compartment," he said, "state law requires us to report personal property discovered in a vessel before we can finalize any sale." "So the paperwork's not finished," I said. "It isn't," he said. "The buyer hasn't taken possession yet, not officially." For the first time since Paige's confession, I felt something other than grief sitting in my chest. Small, fragile, but real. "There's something else, Mr. Whitaker," Danny said, his voice going serious. "Your granddaughter wasn't listed as the owner on the title paperwork we received." I blinked at him. "She wasn't," I said. "No, sir," he said. "Everything on file with the state shows the title's solely in your name." "That's me," I said. "Exactly," he said. "Whoever brought this boat in presented a bill of sale with what looked like your signature on it." "I never signed anything," I told him. His jaw tightened. "I was afraid you'd say that," he said. A cold feeling settled straight through me. Forgery. My granddaughter hadn't just betrayed my trust. Somebody had committed an actual crime against me, whether it was her hand on that pen or somebody else's. "I don't want her arrested," I told Danny right away. "I understand that," he said, gently. "But we do have an obligation to protect the buyer, too. He's not happy, understandably. He put down a deposit already. We've frozen the whole sale until this gets sorted out properly. So she's still mine," I said. "As far as we're concerned, tonight, yes," Danny said. I closed my eyes right there in the cockpit and let myself breathe for what felt like the first time all day. The next morning, I sat across a desk from an attorney named Carol Bissett, a woman who'd spent almost 30 years untangling exactly this kind of family mess out here on the shore. She listened without interrupting once, took slow, careful notes, and when I finished talking, she set her pen down and looked at me steady. "Carol, I don't want revenge," I told her before she could even ask. "I just want my boat back. I think you'll get her back," she said. "And Paige?" I asked. "That depends on what you decide to do next," she said. "I don't follow," I told her. "You have every legal right to pursue this criminally," she said. I looked down at the floor for a long moment. "She's still my granddaughter," I said. Carol didn't argue with that. She just asked me one question. "What would Ruth want you to do?" I already knew the answer before she'd even finished asking it. Ruth would want accountability, not destruction. Carol smiled just a little, like she'd expected exactly that answer from me. "Then let's get your boat back first," she said. "And after that, we give your granddaughter one honest chance to make this right before the law does it for her." Walking out to my truck afterward, my phone rang. Paige. I watched her name sit there on the screen for a long moment before I finally answered. "Grandpa," she said, her voice already shaking. "I think we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked, as calm as I could manage. "The dealership called Tyler," she said. "They're saying the sale's frozen." "I imagine they did," I told her. "They're saying I wasn't allowed to sell it," she said. "They're correct," I told her. Silence stretched out on the line for a long moment. For the first time since she'd confessed, my granddaughter actually sounded scared. "Grandpa, can we talk?" she asked. "Not today," I told her, and I ended the call before she could offer me some excuse I wasn't ready to hear yet. Not because I hated her, because I wasn't ready. Over the next few days, my neighbors started leaving covered dishes on my porch the way folks do down here when they sense something's wrong but don't quite know what to say about it. My neighbor Dale came by one afternoon carrying 2 crab pots and a cooler. "You busy?" he asked. I told him I wasn't, particularly. "Let's go check these pots then," he said, and for the first time in nearly a week, I actually laughed a little. 2 hours later, we sat out on his skiff pulling up mostly empty pots, and Dale finally spoke up without me asking anything. "My boy stole from me once," he said. I looked over at him, surprised. "Cleaned out an account I'd set aside for his mother's medical bills," he said. "Most folks don't know that about him." I asked what he'd done about it. "I stopped trying to punish him for it," Dale said. "Took me years to learn that. He had to lose it on his own, in his own time. I couldn't do that part for him. That sat with me a long while after we packed the pots back up." Meanwhile, Paige kept calling, sometimes twice a day. I let most of them ring through. Carol told me the buyer had gotten his own lawyer involved, wanted his full deposit back, and that Tyler had already spent most of the sale money and had no way of returning it. On Friday, my niece Sherry called me. She hesitated a good while before telling me she'd run into Tyler at the marina bar, bragging to some other men about the boat deal, saying, and I'm quoting her exactly, that old folks don't always know what their own stuff is worth anymore. I sat with that for a minute, not angry so much as finally understanding this had never really been about a food truck at all. That evening, Paige showed up at my door alone, looking like she'd aged 5 years in a week. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messy, no makeup. "I know you don't want to see me," she said. I didn't answer that. I just asked her what she needed. "They want the deposit money back," she said. "I know," I told her. "I can't pay it," she said. "Tyler already spent most of it on the truck build-out." "How much?" I asked. 38,000, she said. "The rest went to permits that never even got approved." I looked at her for a long time. "I have one question," I told her. She nodded, eager, like a question was something she could survive. "When you sold that boat," I asked, "did it ever once occur to you to call me first?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. Finally, she whispered, "No." That answer hurt worse than everything else combined. Not because she admitted it, because she told me the truth. "I don't know what happened to me," she said quietly. "I do," I told her. "You stopped seeing me as your grandfather. You started seeing me as an inconvenience standing between you and what Tyler wanted." Her eyes filled up. "I never meant," she started. "I believe you," I told her. "You never meant for it to get this bad. But you meant to sell my dream regardless." She had nothing left to argue with after that. Monday morning, Carol called before I'd even finished my coffee. "Good news," she said. "The dealership's internal review is done, and they've officially voided the sale." "My boat's still mine," I said. "It is," she said. "But there's one more thing. The buyer wants to meet you." "Why?" I asked. "He wouldn't say exactly," she said. "Just that after hearing the whole story, there's something he needs to tell you himself." That afternoon I sat down across a table from a man about my own age, sun-weathered, silver-haired, wearing a faded Coast Guard cap. His name was Everett Sloan. He stood the moment I walked in. "I owe you an apology," he said, before I'd even sat down. "For what?" I asked. "I almost bought your boat," he said. "I've been hunting for a real wooden deadrise for 2 years. When your granddaughter's boyfriend brought her in, I about cried on the spot. Whoever built that boat cared about her," he said. "That was me," I told him. "When the dealership explained everything," he said, "I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. Not because I lost the boat, because somebody stole another old man's last dream right out from under him." Those words hit harder than I expected them to. A total stranger understood something my own granddaughter hadn't. Everett slid a small photograph across the table toward me. "Think this belongs to you," he said. It was Ruth, standing on the dock beside the Whitfield's hull not long after I'd bought it, laughing, her hair blowing sideways, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. I'd wondered for weeks where that photograph had gotten to. "My wife passed 3 years ago," Everett said quietly. "Heart failure." I told him I was sorry. "So am I," he said. "We were supposed to run down to the Outer Banks together one more time." Ruth and I had said almost that exact thing once, about running down to Ocracoke together. Grief recognizes its own kind, it turns out, wherever you find it. He shook my hand before he left. "Hope you get out on the water soon," he said. That evening, I finally sat down alone with Ruth's sealed envelope. I'd carried it around in my jacket pocket for 2 days straight, afraid to open it, afraid it would feel like losing her all over again. I peeled back the tape with my thumb. "My dearest Harold," it began. "If you're reading this, then one of 2 things has happened. Either we finally got that boat built together and you're teasing me about how many life jackets I packed, or I'm not sitting beside you anymore." I laughed through tears, sitting right there at my own kitchen table. That was exactly her. She always did pack too many life jackets. "Don't let this house turn into a museum," she'd written. "I know you, Harold. You'll tell yourself you're honoring me by never leaving the shop, by letting that boat just sit tied up at the dock forever. But memories don't live in barns in both houses. They travel with whoever keeps loving." I stopped reading for a minute. 4 years, and I'd barely taken that boat past the mouth of the creek. Not because I couldn't, because I hadn't wanted to leave the water that still held her memory in every ripple. "Take her out properly," Ruth had written. "Watch the sun come up over open water at least once. Eat terrible food at some marina diner nobody's ever heard of. Talk to the old watermen you meet along the way. They'll turn into stories later, I promise you that." Then I reached the paragraph that changed something in me for good. "If somebody you love ever hurts you after I'm gone, promise me one thing. Don't let bitterness become the last gift they leave sitting in your heart. Hold people accountable, Harold. Protect what's yours. But don't make anger the only home you live in. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to let somebody else's worst decision become the whole definition of your future." I read that sentence 4 times over. Each time it landed truer than the last. The final page held only a short line. "When you're finally out there on the water, talk to me sometimes. I won't answer back the way I used to, but I think you'll know I'm listening anyway." I folded that letter up careful and set it down. For the first time since Paige's confession, I didn't feel completely consumed by the betrayal anymore. I missed my wife more in that moment than I had in months. But somehow I also felt closer to her than I had in years. The next morning, Paige called again. "Can I come by?" she asked. "Why?" I asked her. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Tyler lied to me, Grandpa." "About what?" I asked. "The food truck," she said. "There was never a real business plan. He never even filed the permits he told me he already had." I felt my stomach tighten all over again. "What happened to the money?" I asked. "I gave most of it to him," she said. "I trusted him. I think he spent it on something else. All of it." The picture was becoming clear now. This was never really about a food truck. It never had been. It had only ever been about wanting something that wasn't his to take. Before she hung up, Paige asked one more question, small and quiet. "If you were me," she said, struggling to even get the words out, "is there any way to fix this?" I looked at Ruth's letter, still sitting on my kitchen table. "You don't start by asking how to fix the money," I told her. "You start by fixing the person who thought stealing from her own grandfather was something she could live with." The line went quiet for a long moment. For the first time, I believed she'd actually heard me. For several days after that, she didn't call at all. Then Carol phoned with an update. "Everything's settled," she said. "You can bring your boat home." "I can," I asked. "You can," she said. "There's one more thing, though." Tyler went down to the dealership himself, demanding they release the deposit money to him directly. They told him the sale had been voided entirely. He wasn't happy about that. Threatened to sue every single person involved. "Some folks never stop digging even after they've already fallen clean into the hole," I said. That afternoon I drove out to the dealership myself. The crew greeted me like an old friend walking through the door. "Told you he'd come back for her," one of the mechanics called out, patting the Whitfield's hull. Danny walked over with a thick folder, had me sign the final release paperwork, then handed me my keys and the little brass padlock for the shed. "Welcome home," he said. I climbed aboard and started her up, and everything smelled exactly the way I'd left it, teak oil and salt air, and something underneath that, I swear, was still Ruth's perfume from all those years of her sitting in that cockpit with me. I rested both hands on the wheel and whispered, "I'm coming, just not today." I wanted the first real run of this boat to start with a peaceful heart, not one still weighed down with unfinished business. When I pulled into my own driveway, Paige's car was already parked out front. She was sitting alone on my porch steps. "No, Tyler." "Heard you got her back," she said, as I climbed down from the truck. "I did," I told her. "She looks good," Paige said. "She always did," I answered. Neither of us moved for a second. Then she said it plainly. "He's gone, Grandpa. Packed up and left town 2 days ago. Guess I wasn't worth much to him without $45,000 sitting in his pocket," she said, and laughed once, bitter. The humor fell flat between us. She looked worn through, and not the physical kind of tired either. "Come inside," I told her. We sat at the same kitchen table where she'd first admitted what she'd done. The silence between us felt different this time. Before, It had been full of her defensiveness. Now it carried something closer to shame. And shame, I've learned over 68 years, is at least an honest thing to sit with. I found his old bank statements on his laptop, she said, staring down into her coffee mug. The truck? I asked. Never real, she said. No permits, no equipment order, nothing. He moved most of the money into some account of his own, 30,000 of it. The rest went to clothes and a used motorcycle and a weekend trip with some buddies of his. I sold your dream, she said quietly, for a motorcycle he already sold again. No grandfather wants to hear his granddaughter say that. No grandfather wants it to be true either. She reached into her bag and set a small velvet box on the table. My grandmother's ring, she said. The one you gave me for graduation. I'm selling it. My car too, the newer one. I'm paying everyone back, she said. The dealership fees, Everett's deposit, all of it. It's going to take me years, probably. But I already started this morning. For the first time in weeks, I saw the girl I'd raised sitting across from me again. Not because she'd fixed a single thing yet, because she'd finally stopped hunting for the easy way out of it. There's something else you should know, she said. It wasn't only Tyler's idea. I complained first, she admitted. About what? I asked. Money, she said, feeling like I never had enough compared to my friends. I looked around this kitchen and thought, Grandpa's just sitting on that old boat. He'll never even notice. I should have walked away right then, she said. I wanted an easy answer instead of a hard truth. So I became exactly the kind of person I always swore I'd never turn into. Those words hurt, but they were honest, and honest hurts a whole lot less than a pretty lie does eventually. I got up and walked into the living room, came back with an old photograph off the shelf. Paige, at 7 years old in an oversized life jacket, front teeth missing, holding up a tiny rockfish like she'd caught a marlin. I handed it to her. Remember this? I asked. She smiled a little, faint. You never missed taking me out, she said. I tried not to, I told her. You worked every Saturday, she said. I still made time, I said. You know what I remember most? She asked. I shook my head. After we docked, she said, you always let me pick out the ice cream flavor. I laughed. You always picked mint chip, I said. And you always picked butter pecan, she said. Your great-aunt Ruth hated butter pecan, I told her. I know, she said. And we both laughed together for the first time in what felt like months. Then she did something I didn't expect. She stood up, came around the table, and hugged me. Not a quick, stiff hug either. She held on the way she used to as a little girl, waiting at the window every evening for my truck to come up the drive. I'm sorry, Grandpa, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't just sell the boat. I sold every single thing you ever tried to teach me. I know, I said. You forgot them, I told her. I chose to, she corrected me. I can't ask you to forgive me, she said. I haven't earned that. But I want to, and I'll spend as long as it takes proving I'm different than this. I believed she meant every word of it. Whether she could actually live it out, only time was going to tell me that for certain. A week later, Carol called one last time. Everything's officially resolved, she said. No legal exposure left at all on your end. I've practiced law almost 30 years out here, she added. I've seen families torn apart over a lot less than this. I looked out my kitchen window while she talked. Paige was down in the driveway, sanding the trailer fenders without being asked to. I hope she doesn't waste this second chance, Carol said before hanging up. So do I told her. Autumn came, and my driveway looked different than it had in years, not because I'd bought anything new, but because every single Saturday morning, before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, Paige was already out there. She never showed up empty-handed. One week it was new zincs for the hull, the next it was fresh line for the fenders, then a replacement bilge pump. None of it cost much. That was never really the point of any of it. She was showing up steady, without being asked, and without expecting a single word of praise for it. That's something money can't ever buy back once it's gone. One crisp morning she climbed up out of the cockpit, hands streaked with varnish. Think that's the last coat she needs, she said. You said that 2 Saturdays running, I told her. I know, she said. But I mean it this time. Old boats always have one more surprise waiting in them, I told her. Guess that's true of families too, she said, and I looked at her and realized she wasn't joking anymore. She'd finally understood. Trust doesn't come back on account of one good apology. It gets rebuilt one honest Saturday at a time. One afternoon, polishing the brass together, she asked me, "Why didn't you have me arrested, Grandpa?" I kept working the rag over the cleat a few seconds before answering. "Because jail would have just taught you to resent me," I said. What did you want to teach me instead? She asked. Accountability, I told her. I deserve consequences, she said. You got them, I said. You lost him. You lost something bigger than that, too, I told her. What? She asked. I looked her in the eye for a while before answering. You lost yourself for a stretch there. She lowered her head. I know, she said quietly. A month later, a small reimbursement check arrived from the dealership, covering some minor repair work done while the Whitfields sat in their care. Not much. Just enough to cover fuel for a real trip down the bay. Ruth always used to say, the world has a funny sense of timing. Maybe she was right about that too. That night I spread the old paper chart across my dining table, the real kind, not something glowing on a phone screen. I traced the whole route we used to talk about, down past Tangier, around to Ocracoke, up through the Sounds and back home along the western shore. Nearly 400 miles of water, all told. I could almost hear Ruth laughing beside me. Trying to see the whole bay in one summer again, aren't you? She'd have said. Maybe I was. 2 days before I planned to leave, Paige stopped by with a small cardboard box. Found this cleaning out Grandma's old cedar chest, she said. Inside were dozens of old photographs. Ruth teaching Paige's mother to swim off the dock. Our first summer with the old John boat. Birthdays, crab feasts, 4th of July fireworks over the creek. One caught my eye straight away. Ruth, standing at the bow of some rented boat, squinting into the sun. When was this? I asked. I was maybe 5, Paige said. We rented a pontoon for one weekend, remember? I'd nearly forgotten entirely. Ruth hadn't. On the back, in her own hand, she'd written, "Someday we'll build our own and do this properly." I slipped that photograph into her journal, right where it belonged. The morning I finally left, my neighbors gathered down by the dock to see me off. Dale showed up with 2 travel mugs of coffee. "Figured you'd want this," he said. I told him I probably would. "Take your time out there," he said, and I told him I intended to. Carol stopped by on her way into the office, smiling at the Whitfield tied up and ready. "You finally made it," she said. "Thanks to a good lawyer," I told her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Thanks to a patient old man." Before I could answer her, another truck pulled up. Paige got out, looking nervous, and walked over slowly. "I wanted to ask you something," she said. I already knew what it was before she even said it. "Would it be all right," she asked, "if I came along for part of the trip?" I looked toward the empty spot in the cockpit, the one that should have had Ruth sitting in it, then back at my granddaughter. "How long?" I asked. "Just a few days," she said. "Where to?" I asked. She named the very first stretch of water Ruth had circled in blue ink on that old chart years before. "Your great-aunt always wanted you to see that part of the bay," I told her. "I found that written in one of her old notebooks," Paige said, eyes filling up. "Pack a bag, then," I told her, and her whole face lit up the way it used to when she was small. 3 days later, somewhere off Tangier Island, we cut the engine and drifted to watch the sun go down over open water. The old hull creaked and settled around us in the evening chop. "It's beautiful out here," Paige said. "I'm glad I came," she added after a while. "Someday," she said, "I'd like to bring my own kids out here. When that day comes," I told her, resting a hand on her shoulder, "teach them one thing." "What's that?" she asked. "Dreams aren't measured by what they cost," I said. "They're measured by what they're worth. And never let money convince you somebody else's dream is yours to sell out from under them." "I won't," she said. "I believe you," I told her, and for the first time in a long while, I actually meant it completely. As the sun dropped below the tree line across the water, I looked up at that wide-open sky and understood something Ruth had been trying to tell me for years without ever saying it outright. Memories don't live inside a boathouse, or a barn, or a museum of a house. They travel with whoever keeps loving. And sometimes the longest way home only opens up once you've finally learned how to forgive somebody who hurt you. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, and I want to be straight with you about it. The mistake most folks make, watching a story like mine, and thinking the lesson is about a boat, or the money, or even about Paige. It isn't. The lesson is that trust takes years and years to build, and it only takes a few careless minutes to spend it completely. And the people we love the most are exactly the ones capable of costing us the most, precisely because we let our guard down around them without a second thought. So here's something small you could actually do today. If there's somebody in your life you've been avoiding a hard conversation with, call them. Not to accuse them of anything, just to ask one honest question, and this time, actually wait around for the answer. And here's something to sit with a little longer than that one. Is there somebody in your own life you've been quietly punishing instead of letting them lose something on their own, the way they actually need to? I'd genuinely like to know what you think about Paige's choices in this story, so go ahead and drop a 1, a 2, or a 3 down in the comments right now. 1. If you think she deserved to lose a whole lot more than she already did. 2. If you think what happened to her was already punishment enough on its own. 3. If you're still somewhere in between, the way I sat for a long, long time myself. And tell me where you're watching this from, and what time it is right there, where you're at. I always love seeing just how far these stories travel out into the world. And if any part of this reminded you of something you've actually lived through yourself, whether you were the one who got hurt or the one who did the hurting, I'd really like to hear that story too, if you're ever willing to share it with me. If stories like this one mean something to you, stick around here a while longer, because there are a whole lot more rivers like this one still left to run.